record button. That would be smart of me to do that. Usually it asks me where I want to record. Rebecca, can you see whether or not I'm recording?
It is recording, yes.
Okay. All right, very good. Well, good morning, everyone. Everybody's got their coffee, I hope. I remembered to bring mine today with me. And Susan doesn't have any extra hands, so she can't have coffee.
No coffee today.
But we're back for another version in our series of the update on the arts and culture in the Wabash Valley, and super excited that you're all back to join us. Today we're talking with Susan Tingley from the Vigo County Historical Society and Museum. And of course we have Rebecca Shake here with us. Rebecca's our residency counselor at Westminster, and she's also our tech guru and our communications monitor on the Coffee Talk series. So as she said, she'll take your questions if you type them in via chat, or if you raise your hand, maybe a little bit like later on in the session today, we can allow you to ask your own question and put it in your own words if you wish. So anyway, let's get started. We're at the museum, and Susan's figured out how to show herself on the screen, plus give us a little tour of some of the exhibits, which is really exciting and different for our Coffee Talk. So this is awesome, Susan. Thank you.
Thanks, I'm glad to be here.
Mm-hmm. Tell us, I guess, first a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with the Historical Society in Vigo County.
Well, I've been with the Historical Society for almost 7 years. I came on board as a consultant for fundraising. It was only supposed to be a short gig, but I ended up loving the organization, and the idea of bringing a new museum downtown was so interesting to me. I ended up staying and worked hand in hand with Mary Lee Hagan, who was the executive director here for 25 years. And she taught me so much about local history, and I really, really did get excited about working on a larger scale at the new museum. She had asked me to consider following in her footsteps as the executive director when she retired, and then the board actually asked me the same thing, and I said yes. So that's how I got here. It's been an amazing journey getting this new museum open. That pretty much consumed me for the last 7 years, doing the fundraising, working with the architect and the engineers and the contractors to design and build the museum out here in the Ehrman Manufacturing Company building.
That was going to be my question. Is how many years in the making was the new space? And it sounds like it's been quite a few years.
Well, the largest number of years was spent in fundraising. The society purchased the building before I came on board in December of 2012. It was the perfect building. It had housed the, most recently before the society owned it, it had housed the, I'm drawing a blank. It was the furniture store, Glidden Furniture Store. And that was here since 1970. So, a great number of years that it was the Glidden Furniture Store. A lot of people will remember coming to Glidden's to shop for furniture. They had multi-floor displays and a really cool old elevator that could be a little scary to ride, but it was a great store to come to downtown. They sold the building to the Historical Society. Prior to Glidden's, it was another furniture store, Fair Furniture, or Furniture Fair. And before that, it was a wallpaper store. But before that, it was originally built in 1895 for the Ehrman Manufacturing Company. And they were here until somewhere, I think, in the 1930s. And so this building housed mostly women working at sewing machines, sewing work clothes and overalls.
And we learned a little bit, did you say the Ehrman, from the Max Ehrman family? Is that right?
It is the Max Ehrman family. It was his brothers that had this. His brothers had their hand in a lot of different businesses. Emil Ehrman was manager of the, the owner basically of the Ehrman Manufacturing Company. And Max actually worked here in this building. He was an accountant and attorney for the Ehrman family, for the brothers. Some of my research shows that he didn't particularly like working here. It wasn't, he preferred to be in a corner writing. And so we like to think that there were corners in this building where Max Ehrman probably sat and wrote some of his poetry and prose.
Very cool. So what's your favorite part, I guess, about your job and about being the executive director there?
I think my favorite part is probably all the friends that I've made, people that enjoy history. There are a lot of people who like our local history. I love talking to people when they come into the museum. We get people from all over the country. It's interesting, since we've reopened, we have fewer people coming to the museum to visit from the community. And I'm talking about reopening after the shutdown for 3 months.
Gotcha.
But when I ask people where they're from, we still have a lot of tourists coming through. We closed in mid-March for the pandemic and reopened in mid-June after the governor allowed us to reopen. But we made the choice even back then to require masks, and it's easy to social distance in here. There's 34,000 square feet in this building. And the exhibit spaces, as you'll see, are all very big, wide open spaces. We did that on purpose because we wanted to have that feel of an open space. And it's turned out it's really great for us during the pandemic that people are able to stay far away from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, they're not going to be crunched in there together at all. And I think about seeing maybe like some of the children in the school, class grades that come through and do tours. I mean, do you anticipate being able to do that during when the schools reopen? Is that something that will be allowed with the COVID regulations?
Of course, it's anybody's guess at this point. We don't know. My assumption is that there won't be field trips because it's too hard to utilize the school buses for that kind of trip and maintain social distancing. And we are not doing group tours at this moment in time. It's too hard to stay 6 feet apart and kind of keep a group moving through the building. So right now, to make sure everybody stays safe, including us, we're just not doing any group tours at this time.
Sure. What kind of needs does the museum have, if any? One of our early coffee talks during this pandemic, we chatted a lot about downsizing and getting rid of different items, and how to do that. Are there certain needs, like if somebody found a historic item in their attic or their basement, are there things like that you need or are looking for?
We typically tell people when they ask, don't throw anything away until you talk to us. We have a lot. The Historical Society was formed in 1922. They actually started collecting then. So that's a lot of years to be collecting items from our history. The original museum at 6th and Washington was opened in 1958, and it was packed full. When we moved over 1,000 boxes of items that we had packed, and then there were a lot of items too big for a box. So what we call the warehouse now in the lower level of the museum is really full. We've actually started going through it and finding items that maybe duplicates, maybe don't really pertain to local history. They're not something we would ever put out on an exhibit, and try to weed those out and make room for the new items that people want to donate. What we're looking for are items that help tell a story about our local history. So if you have an item, it's great if you have a picture of somebody who used that item. It helps to tell the story. If you have something, we do not need any more heavy cast iron irons. We have plenty of those. You think about the items that were in everyone's household, we have plenty of those things. But if it's something that helps to tell the story of a person, place in Terre Haute and Vigo County, then we certainly want to use that. What we do is we talk to donors for items. We look at what you have, kind of have a feel for what we already have in the collection. And then we usually say, if it's something that you just really want to get out of your hands and it's not something we want to keep in the collection, would you be all right with us putting it in an auction to raise funds to help care for the collection? And overwhelmingly, we hear yes.
Oh, Niall, that's an interesting way to utilize a piece as well, because then it's still going to go to someone who appreciates it and values it,
Right.
and you can get it off your hands and out of your space.
There's a lot of talk among museums internationally where they're looking at what do we have in storage that no one is ever going to see. Art museums are grappling with that. What do they have in their collection that is never going to go out on display? And try to find ways to either donate it to another museum. Ultimately, if they have to sell it, they might do that. But it's really a way to get things out of the boxes, out of storage, and out where other people can see them, whether it's in a public collection or a private collection.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. That's neat. What you're showing us, I think, part of an exhibit there, or what did you want to show us today, Susan, as far as your exhibit?
Well, this exhibit celebrates the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. And 1920 was the year. This is 2020. How could we not have an exhibit that's a major milestone for women, and it's and for our society as a whole? And it's also not that long ago. I mean, there are people here on this Zoom call that probably had mothers who shared stories about their first time voting after the 19th Amendment passed. My grandmother would have voted, or at least would have remembered women getting the right to vote. So it's a timely exhibit, and also a lot of people don't know about our local history with regard to suffrage. So we created this exhibit it was ready to open in March, and then we shut down. So nobody saw it until now. We're actually making a few changes because we're working with the League of Women Voters to bring in some more information that they have. It is also the 100th anniversary of the League of Women Voters, and they have a wonderful timeline that I'm working on getting prepared to hang on the wall here, so we can tell the timeline of the League of Women Voters in Vigo County. Again, we're trying to stay local. We tell the overall story of suffrage, but it's interesting to learn about the women and men who participated in the suffrage movement.
And are there particular individuals who are featured in the exhibit here?
Sure. Do you want me to start to take you guys around the exhibit here and show you what we have?
Let's do it.
All right. So let's see. We have, when you walk in, let me come back out here and you can see what it looks like as you enter this exhibit space. We have our current exhibition, Vigo Women Vote 100 Years. And we start to tell the story here of Vigo suffragists. And I'll just read this to you because it's kind of hard to see on here. There were many local women who fought for women's rights, and in particular, the right to vote. Some were public figures, some were in the background. Some were white, some were African American, but they all worked in their own way to bring about votes for women. And after the 19th Amendment was included in the US Constitution, they continued their work to ensure that women exercised their right to vote. As Anna Bowles-Wiley wrote in the Wabash Valley Review, which was a local newspaper in 1920, quote, leaders in Vigo County who have been foremost in suffrage are now in the front line trenches fighting for votes. Women's votes, men's votes. For these women are not going to be any more content to have a mere polling of women's votes alone than they were with men's votes before. but they wish the full strength of expression from the whole people. And that really has been the work of the League of Women Voters to continue what Anna Bowles-Wiley wrote there, to really encourage people to vote. It's nice that this is a year that we're actually having, a major election. We're going to be voting for president and a lot of other opportunities to vote, to bring people in that you want to see run our government, run our country. So it's nice that I think women should really celebrate that right. A lot of people fought for that. The Ida Husted Harper, we did these posters as if they are speaking of themselves. Ida Husted Harper was a local woman. She moved here, she came to Terre Haute in 1871 as a newlywed. And she really had a dream of women getting the right to vote. And keep in mind that suffrage was about the vote, but these women were really trying to fight for the rights of women for a lot of things, including education and the right to work. So Ida Husted Harper wrote a column for the Terre Haute Saturday Evening Mail newspaper. This is in the 1870s, 1880s. It was called A Woman's Opinion, and she wrote under an assumed name so as not to distress her husband. I love that line. But she later changed her mind and used her own name and even accepted money for writing of the column against her husband's wishes. She also divorced her husband. So Ida Husted Harper was a strong woman who really felt strongly about women's right to vote, and all the other rights that she was fighting for. She met Susan B. Anthony, the leader of the National Woman Suffrage Association, when she came to Terre Haute in 1878. Wow. One of her fellow Hautians, Eugene B. Debs, sponsored Susan B. Anthony to come to Terre Haute and give a speech. And Susan and Ida became good friends. And later, Ida helped Susan B. Anthony write the book, The Life and Work of Susan B. Anthony, among other books. And she survived to see the right for women to get the right to vote. We have our little, this is Ida. So we have Ida sitting at her typewriter here. Mary Lee Hagan helped us set up this exhibit. She is a miracle worker with mannequins. So she still volunteers here, and we make sure that she definitely dresses our mannequins. She's so good at it. And then we move on to Grace Evans. Grace Evans arrived in Terre Haute in 1915 with her husband, Fred Harris Evans, and her daughter. And Fred went to work with the Terre Haute Police Department. Grace Evans was African American. Black women had a whole different challenge during suffrage. We also cover the African American woman's suffrage. What they went through was different than what the white women went through. And unfortunately, they really, the right to vote was passed in 1920, but really only white women were able to vote because of all the restrictions put on African Americans at the time. But Grace was instrumental in working in Vigo County in Terre Haute with a group. It was called the National Association of Colored Women and the Central District Association of Colored Women and the Indiana State Federation of Colored Women. She was a very strong advocate for the right to vote. That right to vote for African Americans continued as a struggle until the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed. And at that time, 250,000 new African American voters had been registered, both men and women. One of my favorite people, Bertha Pratt King. Some of you on this call have heard of, or may even have known people or attended the King Classical School. Bertha ran that school. She came to Terre Haute in 1900 to take the position of tutor for Frederick B. Smith's children. She started the school with Mary Sinclair Crawford in 1905. It went on to be called the King Classical School. Bertha traveled on the Chautauqua circuit, where she would travel around in the Midwest mostly, and she would speak in different towns. We have a nice diary where she talks about what it was like in different towns. In fact, I think there's a quote on here. Everywhere I voiced the message that all women needed the ballot because they were concerned equally with men in good and bad government, equally responsible for civic righteousness. It was my opinion that the politics of the day needed soap and water, broom and dustpan, and it is the women of the country who are best fitted to do the cleaning up. Ida also wrote a book called The Worth of a Girl. Let's see if I can step out of the shadow, get the shadow off. The Worth of a Girl, she wrote in 1916, and in this book, she writes about what it's like for girls at that time to get an education. A lot of them up into that time period were being trained to be good wives. But that, as Bertha said, that didn't take into account the women who didn't end up getting married, the women whose husbands, they became widowed at a young age. What were they going to be able to do for a job? So she not only spoke on these, on the Chautauqua circuit about women's right to vote, but right to an education and the right to work. I love Ida, and another reason I love Ida, she and Max Ehrman were an item for many, many years, and they actually married 4 months before he died of an aneurysm. So they have an interesting love story, and two really, really interesting people. When you read Max Ehrman's poetry and you see his outlook on life, and you think about Bertha and her passion for women and education, I would love to have sat at their kitchen table. I think that would have been so great to hear their conversations. Does anybody have any questions so far? Nope.
I noticed, Susan, on the previous poster that you have up, there's a little code thing in the bottom corner. Is that one of those scannable things? And that maybe, what does that link you to?
That's a QR code. It says, scan this QR code to see a list of African American suffragists and learn more about them, or visit the education page at suffragistmemorial.org.
Oh, that's neat.
It's a really great resource to read more in depth about national women's suffrage and the different women and men who participated in that.
That's a neat opportunity to kind of gather a little bit more information on your, as you're on your phone or whatever device that you're going to take with you and kind of continue to learn and educate.
Right.
That's cool.
Right. Well, I mean, I think one of the things that we preach at the museum a lot is that we never stop learning. There's so many, it's incredible how much information is here in this building. You go up to the 3rd floor into our archives and start digging around in the files, and you will be amazed at how much you could not possibly get it all in one lifetime. I want to give a shout out to Dorothy Jurst. She lives there at Westminster Village. She is a former director of the museum. She did a fantastic job when she was here, and then continued with her love of history in sharing that throughout Terre Haute and Vigo County. And she still is a great mentor to me when I run into her, which I haven't been able to lately because of the shutdown, but I used to be able to see her on a frequent basis, and she was very, very encouraging to me in my job here at the museum. Helen Benbridge spent most of her life at 213 North 7th Street. In 1904, she started working at the Terre Haute Tribune as a society reporter and later on the editorial staff. But she was most proud of the work she did to help women gain the right to vote. In 1919, she was elected as the president of the Women's Franchise League of Indiana at the state convention. She was proud to serve both her state and her country as a leader in the suffrage movement. Later that year, one of their most important challenges came after the US Congress submitted the 19th Amendment to the states for ratification. The League, under her leadership, had to work diligently to secure pledges from the Indiana legislators to ratify the amendment. So keep in mind that Congress passed the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote, but the states had to ratify it. So women were working in each state. They had to get enough states to ratify it in order for it to actually become a part of the Constitution. And that was one of the things that we cover here too with the African American women. Unfortunately, because of the southern states, I mean, they were adamant that a lot of people were adamant in the southern states that they didn't want women to get the right to vote because it meant Black women would also have the right to vote. So there became a split between the white women and the Black women in the suffrage movement. A lot of the leaders, the white leaders of the suffrage movement kind of capitulated to the southern states and said, okay, well, how about if we have the Black women and men march at the back of our marches? Trying to lessen the value of the African Americans in the movement in order to get the southern states to pass or to ratify. It was a horrible sacrifice to make, but it's part of our history. We need to talk about that. And Kate Debs, you know, I was surprised. I figured that she would have been a suffragist because of who she was married to. I know very little about Kate Debs. Mickey Moran, who's a local historian, is writing a book with her husband about Kate Debs, which I can't wait for them to finish it because I really want to know more about Kate. But she did share with me, they shared with me that Kate was active, just she wasn't comfortable being out in front of people, not like Eugene was. And she even says, I did not have Gene's outgoing personality, but I truly believed in the cause of socialism. I often accompanied Gene on business and campaign trips. And then she also, in 1910, she wrote, but woman has all the essential qualities of man, not accepting his mentality and initiative. And if she is to develop the best there is in her, she must be free and she must be the equal of man in the respect to every right and every opportunity required for the untrammeled expression of her voice and will. That's really a powerful statement. I love that about Kate.
Susan?
Uh-huh.
Just to clarify, and Sharon Daly had a question, in 1920, African American were in the North were able to vote then?
To some degree, but Jim Crow laws were rampant at that time. So just as we see today, there are efforts to make it a little more difficult for people to vote. That was magnified immensely in the 1920s for Black women and men. African American men had received the right to vote in the 19th century, but very few of them were given the opportunity to vote. So I don't have, I'd love to have some more statistics on that, Sherry, and there's a little research project for you. To go in and see what you can find out about, what was it local? What was it like in Indiana? There's probably statistics that tell us somewhere how many African Americans were actually voting back then. Mm-hmm. That was a good question, Sherry, thanks. So we also have some timelines. This is a timeline of Hoosier women's suffrage. The state of Indiana was actually working to get women the right to vote. Different states had already passed suffrage laws that allowed women to vote prior to Congress passing the 19th Amendment. So states were giving rights to women. Indiana actually passed, in 1917, they passed a voting rights for women, but then the Indiana Supreme Court overturned it. So this is from a poster encouraging women to get out there and vote, where to register. But unfortunately, they weren't allowed to vote because the Supreme Court overturned that. There was another opportunity in the 1880s where state legislators had passed the right for women to vote. But that vote had to be taken 2 times and for it to actually pass. And back then, our state legislators only met every 2 years. So 2 years later, they came back together, and mysteriously, none of the paperwork could be found that showed that first passage 2 years before.
Wow.
And so they were not allowed to bring that up again. So there were a lot of efforts to keep women from voting. This is,
gosh, like it's amazing that you can stay focused and committed to a cause when you face so many different obstacles and having to stretch it out over a period of time and you don't have any reward and gratification, of course.
Yeah, and a lot of the women suffered greatly for their efforts in the suffrage movement. This is an interesting little grouping of, these were postcards. We enlarged them so you could see them easier. These were anti-suffrage postcards. And you can see by looking at this that there was a real effort to show how awful it would be if women got the right to vote. My goodness, men were going to have to do the washing and take care of the babies.
Yes. Poor thing.
Yeah, but this one, look at this. I don't know if you can see that. I mean, here's a man holding 2 crying babies while his wife is going off to vote on election day. How horrible for the men it was going to be if women got the right to vote.
Yes. Wow.
So it's something that we kind of, a lot of us take for granted that we have this right. But women, you mentioned that how hard it would be to keep fighting. But keep in mind that there were so many rights that women didn't have. Women weren't allowed to inherit property. Women weren't allowed to, if your husband died, you didn't necessarily get the property. It was a very, very difficult time for women. So that right to vote meant that they could change their lives in so many ways. And I think that it wasn't just about, I want to get out there and vote for the elected officials. It's, I want to get out there and vote to change my life. And that became a driving force for women back then.
Yeah, they knew.
I think it's a driving force for us today too.
Sure. That was the only way it was going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
By having a voice. Wow.
Does anybody else have any questions about this exhibit? If you can get here, it's a nice exhibit to see. There's something else I want to show you in here. This is a nice, and we're going to get a shadow, but here's a photograph of the League of Women Voters. It's not dated, but correct me if I'm wrong. Those of you on this call, it looks like 1940s, somewhere in there. Looking at the dresses and the hats. That's how we date a lot of photos, is by what people are wearing or a car. This photograph, let's see if I can get I don't know if I can get a good shot of that. This photograph was donated by my Aunt Barbara Tingley. She's there at Westminster Village. A lot of you know her. And Barbara is actually my aunt by marriage, but we've adopted each other. I admire her a lot. This is a picture that includes her aunt, Ethel Tingley, and Helen Price, and Mary Macbeth, and they were riding in, this was an event it was a parade, motor car parade. An event was arranged by the League of Women Voters on August 21st, 1920. It was here in Vigo County. You just got to come to the exhibit and see this. I can't get a good picture of it. In the background, you can see the fire station number 5 that's at 9th and Ohio Street.
Okay.
And so this motor car procession celebrated the ratification by the 36th state of the federal suffrage amendment. And in the brilliantly decorated cars rode several officers and members of the Vigo County League of Women Voters, as well as city and county officials and candidates. So these are the kind of things, what a great story. Don't only look at things that you might have, look at your photographs, look at your documents. We have lots of yearbooks. So contact us if you have yearbooks that you want to donate. We'd have to look and see if we already have that yearbook. But people have photographs in their collections they don't realize would be an awesome addition to the museum and telling the stories here.
Yes. When I'm curious too, Susan, about, so I guess a little bit more of the impact of the virus and things. I imagine you're using some of the time, right, where you used while you were closed down, some of the time to like look through the things that are in storage, you know, kind of start to sort through and go through things there and probably prepare for new exhibits and future exhibits. I also saw something on your Facebook page where it looked like someone is pouring through some old sports videos and footage for maybe for an exhibit as well. I mean, those are the kinds of things you're using this time for, kind of a slower time?
Yeah, when we were shut down, we still worked from home, and there were a lot of things that we worked on. One is we've had volunteers since we opened in our archives, and they have been going through our file folders that we have in the file cabinets and writing down every item that's in those file folders. These are paper files, so these are they're newspaper clippings and you name it. There could be a little business card or something in there. So they write down everything that's in those files, and then we have a database called Past Perfect that it's a museum database that we have started entering in all that information to make our files searchable. Where before, and Mary Lee could attest to this, and so could Dorothy, if you wanted to find something, you had to kind of think how the person who put it away might have thought, and what file it could have gone in, what they might have named that file. And then you had to start digging around through the folders. They were in alphabetical order by categories, but it was a lot of digging. Now we'll be able to go to the computer, we'll be able to put in some search words, and it'll tell us what files those items are in, where we could find the information we're looking for. So that's been a major project. While we were shut down, the staff continued to get paid, and we were keying in a lot of that information from home. Our president of the board, Eric Parker, is our IT whiz. We're very lucky to have him around, just like you love having Rebecca around. Having Eric here, he is able to do just about anything to get us hooked up on the computers, our touchscreen learning centers, and some of the other things that we have in the museum that require that kind of techie knowledge that we don't have.
Yes. So that's fascinating, because I was thinking about, you know, asking about volunteer opportunities is one of my questions, and you always think, well, I could sign up to be a docent, but not everyone can maybe physically do that. But we can certainly take a file or a box of things and go through it for you. And
exactly. And we also, I mean, that gives you an opportunity to be, you know, fairly isolated up in our archives area. We only allow a couple of people in there at a time. And then they can also help visitors when they come in if they're looking for something. Most of our volunteers up there know how to find information for visitors. We have, so we have guest services volunteer opportunities where you're at the lobby desk or in our soda shop or in the museum store. So that's kind of the front of the museum volunteer opportunity. And then upstairs in archives on the 3rd floor would be more research related.
That's neat. Fascinating. I had no idea.
Mm-hmm. Now you had asked me too, I mean, we've been talking about donating items, but museums all over the country have always had to have the support of local people to help keep the doors open. And one way that works is through memberships. What we're seeing now, because we don't have as many people coming to the museum, we're seeing about half the number of visitors coming to the museum. So our revenue stream for admissions has been greatly reduced. And what we're hoping is that we can make up for that with memberships. And you can go to our website and find our membership levels, and you can actually sign up for a membership there, or we can send you something in the mail. But that's a good way to support us. A membership also gets you free admission to the museum for a year. We have individual memberships and family memberships, grandparents memberships, and then of course a life membership is $1,000, and that gets you a lifetime admission to the museum as well as some other perks. So those are there, but we have something new. I'll share with you guys. We haven't even published this yet, but the board of directors recently made some changes. They created History Maker donor memberships, where you can make a donation at different levels, and that includes a membership. So for instance, a silver level membership would be $250, gold level $500, director circle $1,000, president circle. It goes on, obviously goes up as we go through it. And those do include memberships at different levels. This is a way to help the museum as well, to make a donation and also, get something out of it. You can get a membership out of it as well.
Yes. And I know that a lot of the organizations we've been speaking with and the arts and culture community have had to cancel, all those key fundraiser events that they'd counted on and such. Mm-hmm. And, but the museum has a unique opportunity with that membership to be able to raise some funds there. That's a really good thing we should all look into and take advantage of.
Well, we can all use the support. Museums are suffering here in Terre Haute, the lack of visitors. When we created this museum downtown, we created it in a way to make it more self-sustaining. In the past, at the old museum, we didn't charge admission, and there really were very few revenue streams other than just donations. And when we designed this museum, we came up with ways that we could make it more self-sustaining. Yeah. And unfortunately, the pandemic has really cut into that. Now, I will say, when we were when we had to close and we were staying at home, I did quite a bit of work writing for grants. We received some operations grants. They were more emergency funding because of the pandemic. And we were able to kind of bridge the gap there while we were closed. But now we're looking at what we can do to help keep us going through all of this.
Yes.
I think Sherry Daly was asking another question. What was that, Rebecca?
Oh, wait.
Rebecca, you're muted.
Thank you. Sherry asked if you can get a soda at the soda shop.
You can get a Coke float, root beer float, other kinds of floats that we have. You can get a sundae. And then we also, we have hot dogs and chips. You can get lunch there. And, what's better than hot dogs, chips, Coke, and ice cream? Sounds like a great lunch to me. Actually, I have it quite a bit. We have our regular hot dog. You can get mustard, ketchup, whatever you want on it. I've been told that ketchup on a hot dog is a no-no, but I like it. Then we have the Stiffy Green hot dog, which includes a bright green relish. And those of you who know Stiffy Green, you know what I'm talking about. Those of you who don't, think that's a really weird name for a hot dog. Stiffy Green is a haunted legend here in Terre Haute, and we do tell that story of Stiffy Green here in the Haunted Legends exhibit. There's Stiffy Green's mausoleum. It might be a little dark, but let me see if I can get in here.
Yeah, that looks great.
Yeah, here's our cemetery.
Oh.
My.
And let's see, we've got flashlights here. Some of you remember going out to the cemetery at Highland Lawn Cemetery when Stiffy Green was out there. Here's the mausoleum. And I think I can get this. Let's see if I can find
I'm looking
Stiffy
fine.
Green in there.
Oh, that's so cool.
There he is.
Oh yeah, you got it.
There he is. There's Stiffy
So
Green in
creepy.
his mausoleum. And we also have this portrait that comes to life and tells the story. It gives the legend of Stiffy Green. We have the Sheets Mausoleum, Preston House. This is actually the mantle from the Preston House. And we have touchscreen learning centers in a lot of these exhibits where you can scroll through, and here's the Faceless Nun. You can open it up and it tells the legend of the Faceless Nun at St. Mary the Woods. So we do have the Stiffy Green hot dog. We also have a Madame Brown hot dog. Some of you know the story of Madame Brown. She ran a brothel here in town that was pretty famous around the country. A lot of people knew about her brothel. So the Madame Brown hot dog has a brown mustard that has red wine in it. So she was a pretty classy broad apparently, and she had in her house once a month she would hold these fancy dinners where men could come. They had to dress, you know, it was a tux affair, and you would come and have dinner, drinks, cigars, and followed by entertainment. If you catch my drift.
We actually have a couple ladies that have raised their hand. If you guys are
Uh-huh.
okay, I'll allow them to talk so they can answer their questions.
Yeah,
That would be good.
Go ahead.
All right, I've got Laura Goodrich and Sherry Daly. You both should be able to talk if you turn on your microphones.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Laura, how are you?
Okay, sorry I missed last week. I'm a little late today, so I don't know. You may have already given. I'd like to have the hours and the fees, and if Susan would want to mail me, you have the address, the brochures on membership and stuff. Not that I know whether I can afford to join, but I'm interested, I'll put it that way.
I'd love to send those to you. And we have, our hours are Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 5 p.m. We're closed right now, temporarily closed on Sundays because our visits were so low. We needed to make some adjustments. So through the month of August, we'll be closed on Sundays, and we've always been closed on Mondays. So right now, Tuesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And our admissions are $7 for adults, $6 for seniors, $4 for children 5 and older, or 5 to 18, and then under 5 is free. And members obviously come in at no charge.
Okay, thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, and like I say, still mail me some information, and I've got a lot going on, but I'm still wanting to send you some items that you might be interested in posting. But I couldn't find the picture of my mother in the taxi hat. She was a cabbie back in the 1940s and again in the 60s.
You gotta keep looking for that, Laura. That's such a fabulous story to tell.
Right. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Bye.
Sorry. Sherry, you're still on. What was
Oh, okay, sure. I just wanted to mention, Susan, I understand that Ida Harper's husband was the chief legal counsel for Eugene Debs. Is that right?
I have not heard that before, but that would be a great research project.
And I think that that's true. And if so, it's pretty ironic that he didn't want her to write for the paper, since I think Debs was primarily responsible for bringing Susan B. Anthony to Terre Haute.
You're
think so.
absolutely right. It is very weird. That would be a weird thing because
I think
all the information we have, and Ida, there's a quote from her that her husband, he was like, oh, well, I'll let you write for the newspaper as long as you don't use your name or accept any money for it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, we somehow. Oh, yeah. Why don't the Deb's house? They would certainly know.
yeah, they would probably know who
legal
his attorney
counsel
was.
was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how ironic that would be. When you find
Yes.
out, let me know.
Okay, will do.
I'll also read you. So Sherry actually commented in here too. She said, all of your efforts have made us Hoshians even more proud of our community. The new museum is user-friendly as well as thoughtfully and beautifully done. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Sherry. You're so sweet.
You're welcome. I haven't heard anybody say anything except wow when they go to the museum.
We'd love to hear that too. We have these postcards here in our post office exhibit where people can leave. They can fill out a postcard. They write something on the back of it, and they slide it here into our mail slot. Here's one. We asked people to say what they liked about the museum. Everything. Great place. And these are really fun to read. We get a lot of really great postcards from people. And then upstairs on the 3rd floor, we have a little nook to tell the story of Max Ehrman. And in that place, we've got a spot where people can sit at a table and just jot down maybe a poem. Most people end up jotting down really nice things about the museum. So yes. It's a fun thing for us to go up and read that as well. Some of you, this is a schools and sports exhibit that we're in right now, and some of you will remember some of these high schools.
We actually have another question. Sarah would like to know, how often do the exhibits change?
That's a really good question because, at the old museum, we really didn't have much of an opportunity to change very much. When we were laying out this museum, we had in mind that we would be changing the exhibits periodically. We did, for instance, where the Vigo Women Vote exhibit is right now in the special exhibit gallery that we just left a little while ago, that originally, when we opened, had an exhibit in there about Vigo County farms that had been in the same families for over 100 years.
Oh, wow.
We're going to be changing, I think the next change is coming this fall in the clothing and textiles exhibit. Right now, we're featuring women's fashions from in the 1800s, 1900s, mostly 1800s in here. And this is going to change for the fall. One of the things we think about in the fall is being kind of warm and cozy, and we think of quilts. So we're going to have a quilt exhibit here in the clothing and textiles exhibit for the fall.
I would think, Susan, I mean, you mentioned obviously that the attendees being down and probably about half of what you're used to seeing. I sure would like to think, as people are, probably avoiding those airplanes and avoiding those big trips, that we've done in the past, that they're doing more road trips and day trips and things. And, and so places like the Vigo County Historical Museum and, and the art spaces, tours, and all that around, would become a little bit more attractive to individuals, and maybe kind of a resurgence in that for families, I would like to think, as they're doing more planning short road trips and looking for things closer to home to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
we're hoping that. Plus, think about the fact that it's like 110 degrees outside and we have air conditioning.
Yeah.
So it's a great place to wear your mask, social distance, and stay cool.
Maybe that could be really big on the front page of your, website.
Yeah, right. Yeah, come in and stay. Well, I think in a lot of cases, because we're new, we did just open last November. Because we're new, people aren't necessarily thinking. We don't come to mind as often as some of the other things people are used to doing. But Terre Haute is a place where I've always said there's more to do I possibly have time to do. My husband Michael and I talk about that all the time. Whenever somebody says there's nothing to do in Terre Haute, well, up until the pandemic, there was so much to do in Terre Haute you couldn't possibly get it all done.
Yes.
Now with reductions, unfortunately, anything that would draw a crowd is not going to. That's not going to be something that I'm going to go to personally.
Yep.
I hate that because I love the theater opportunities in Terre Haute, the symphony, the music, the galleries, the openings, all those things I absolutely adore in Terre Haute. But we can't do those.
Yeah.
But you can come to the History Museum and you can spend a lot of time just wandering. It's kind of like being in an indoor park for people who love history.
I love it. Oh, you did such a great job sharing with us. I'm sure your arm is tired from holding your phone up. Everything.
Well, I appreciate you having me. It's been really fun, and it's great to share what we have here with everybody.
No kidding. You should be very proud. Very, very good job. I'm going to also next Tuesday, we're talking with Fred Nation from the Swope Art Gallery or an art museum. And so we'll learn a little bit more from him. And then the following Tuesday, we're going to have Mary Kramer back from Art Spaces. So hang in there with us, everybody. The next couple of weeks, we still have more to share on the arts and culture community in Vigo County. And thank you again, Susan. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me. See you all at the museum.
Okay.
Bye, Susan.